On a January afternoon in 1919, in the north end of Boston, the warmest day in weeks, the ground began to rumble. People nearby thought it was the elevated train passing overhead, as it did 100 times a day, a low, familiar groan of metal. But the groan did not pass. It grew. And then came a sound like machine gun fire as steel rivets tore loose one by one. A storage tank, 50 feet high and 90 feet across, was coming apart. What poured out of it was not water and not oil. It was molasses, 2.25 million gallons of it. A wave of dark syrup, 25 feet high, moving through the streets at 35 miles an hour. It was sweet and it was heavy, and it killed 21 people in a matter of minutes. This is the story of how a man who skipped a simple test of water built a wave of molasses that changed the rules for every building since. Small cause, long consequence. To understand it, you have to go back a few years, to the height of the First World War. Molasses, in those years, was not only a thing for kitchens. Fermented, it became industrial alcohol. And industrial alcohol made munitions. The thick syrup that sweetened a cake could also help to fire a shell. It was enormously profitable, and a company called United States Industrial Alcohol wanted to store as much of it as it could. So in 1915, its subsidiary, the Purity Distilling Company, built an enormous tank on the Boston waterfront. It rose over the crowded North End, beside the wharf, beside the railway, beside the homes and shops of a dense immigrant neighbourhood. The man placed in charge of building it was named Arthur Jell. He was the company's treasurer. He was good with money, he was careful with costs, and he had no training whatsoever in engineering or architecture or the building of anything at all. A tank to hold 13,000 tons of liquid is a serious piece of engineering. The pressure at its base is immense. There was a standard way to check such a tank before trusting it. You filled it with water first. Water is heavy, like molasses, but harmless. If the tank leaked or strained or failed, water would show you safely and spill away to nothing. The test was simple and cheap and known to everyone in the trade. Fill it with water. Watch. Be sure. Arthur Jell did not do this. To fill the tank with water and wait would cost time, and time was money. Instead, he put in only a few inches of water, a token gesture, and then declared the tank ready and ordered the molasses. From the very first filling, the tank leaked. Dark syrup wept from its seams between the steel plates down the sides. Children from the neighbourhood came with pails and cups to collect the free molasses that ran from the joints. The leaks were not a curiosity. They were a warning, written in syrup down the side of the tank, plain for anyone to read. The company's answer to the warning was not to repair the tank. It was to hide it. They painted the tank brown, the same colour as the molasses, so that the leaks would no longer show. And every time the tank was filled, the people who lived beside it heard it groan. A deep, metallic complaint as the steel took the strain. The tank had been built with steel too thin for its size, by later analysis barely half of what it should have been. And the steel was brittle, lacking what it needed to bend rather than crack in the cold. It was a wall waiting to break. For 3 years it held, mostly, leaking and groaning, painted over, ignored. Then, on the 15th of January 1919, the tank was nearly full, freshly topped with warm molasses days before. The day was unusually mild for January. The metal shifted. The pressure found the weakest seam. And the wall of the tank tore open into great curved sheets of steel, flung outward, and the molasses was loose. A wave 2 stories high swept across the district. It was not a thin liquid, it was a dense, suffocating tide. It crushed buildings from their foundations. It buckled the steel pillars of the elevated railway. It threw a truck through a fence. And it caught people. Workers on their lunch break, a boy collecting firewood, a woman crossing the street, drivers, labourers, children. Molasses does not let go. Those it did not kill by force, it trapped, pulling them down, filling the mouth, hardening in the cold air. Rescuers waded into the waste and could barely move. It took hours to reach some of the trapped, days to recover all the dead. 21 people died, around 150 were hurt. The cleanup of the streets would take months. When the question came of who was to blame, the company had an answer ready. It was not us, they said. It was a bomb. Anarchists, they claimed, had blown up the tank. It was a plausible fear in 1919, a time of real bombings and unrest. It was also untrue, and to test the claim, the courts did something that was, at the time, unusual. They gathered experts, engineers, metallurgists, architects, called to examine the evidence and explain it to the court. For years the testimony ran, and the experts found no bomb. They found thin steel, brittle metal, and a tank never properly tested. They found Arthur Jell, the treasurer who had skipped the water, who could not read an engineering drawing, signing off on a structure he could not understand. The court found the company negligent. It was ordered to pay damages, a very large sum for the time, divided among the families and the injured. But the deepest consequence was not the money. It was the precedent. The disaster became a landmark in how a country holds its builders responsible. In the years that followed, states began to require that real engineers, qualified and accountable, sign and stamp the plans for structures like this. Not a treasurer, not a man who was good with costs, a trained engineer putting their name and their license behind the safety of the thing. The stamp on a modern engineering drawing, the seal that says a qualified person is responsible for this, grew from disasters like this one. Every tank, every bridge, every building that now requires a professional to vouch for it carries, faintly, the memory of a Boston street under syrup. Arthur Jell saved a few hours and a few dollars by not filling a tank with water. And the cost of those few hours was 21 lives, a neighbourhood drowned, and a lesson the modern world built into its law. A skipped test, a painted-over leak, a groan in the steel that everyone heard and no one heeded.